Evening, the news gang is here tonight. 82 minutes at Annex. 1,000 ways to kill yourself and make the bed later. Echesa and the VIP lift and other short stories. Also on the show tonight, no longer at ease. Or is the Kinoti Haji bromance back? We'll also take a look at the BBI rift in the valley. Plus, the kicker, the take, the punchline, and the angle. Unfortunately, Jamila is still away. We hope to have her back soon. Ladies and gentlemen, 82 minutes, 23 minutes, 27, 25. Interesting developments. That clip, or is it a number of clips that were displayed today by DCI? Linus, why do you think the DCI decides this is not very common? I mean, you don't see that kind of elaborate display of what could be part of evidence being displayed at a press conference in that manner. What do you think that was about?
I think DCI is trying to do full disclosure, just show everything that you have gathered. Because of the nature of this case has attracted a lot of public attention. It's been a very mysterious kind of case, and people want to know what really transpired. Now, the first inconsistency that comes out in what the DCI did today was how long did Rashid Echesa and his team spend in Harambee House Annex? And all we had to do was to watch the footage. An argument may be made that some of that time was spent outside. Yeah, I mean, the DP's chief of staff, Ken Osido, actually said as much that, well, you know, that footage confirmed that only about 23 minutes was spent inside Annex. The rest was in the parking lot. And that. But that information was not available in the beginning. We were just told it was 23 minutes. But now the DCI comes with a footage that says it's 82 minutes, quite a long time. And I think going forward, Kenyans will be watching to see how this is going to be converted into evidence that will be taken to court, or whether this footage will actually produce the actual suspects in what the DCI has now confirmed to be the murder of Sergeant Kenei. And interesting, Yvonne, that they made a direct link between what happened at the Harambee House Annex and what they are now
I mean, yeah, I know, because when we were watching it, and I was here doing the 4 o'clock bulletin, and I kept wondering, you know, at the beginning, before it finally came out with the
like why are they showing us all these things?
Why are they showing us all of these things with Echesa, and yet we're talking about Kenei's murder? And then, you know, when I believe it was Hassan Mugambi who asked, you know, the DCI officials, is there a link? And he says 100%. I think that was one of the things that was interesting for me. The other, you know, Linus, like you said, just full disclosure to the point of DCI George Kinoti standing up and demonstrating just how this could have happened, talking about, you know, describing in very graphic detail, you know, the murder scene. I mean, I think there was a part where he talked about, and I actually, brain spatter on the ceiling. And, you know, I was just about to say it at 4 o'clock, and I thought, can I even say this on television? I mean, it was just, you know, he stood up and he, you know, demonstrated how it could have happened.
That sort of removing his gun.
Right,
and, like,
you
know, like
and and that was
actually thought he was going to do that.
Yes, I was like, no. The other chilling thing for me, I think, was just seeing Kenei in this video. I mean, this is the last time that Kenei was seen alive, and I couldn't get over this, looking so enthusiastic and doing his job, you know, walking up and down. This was a young 33-year-old man. Was he about to get married with a young child, a toddler, an infant, I believe? I thought that was just, you know, there he is. I mean, take a look at that young man walking there.
Very energetic. It struck me, Francis, what happened when that Range Rover arrived at Annex. I mean, the police officer, the one at the gate, goes to this vehicle, and for some reason, you know, the normal way they would do whatever, but then he goes there, and I think whoever was driving, I assume it was Echesa, rolls down the window, and he's given a very hearty salute, and then in the car goes. That was, for me, a very interesting moment in that video.
Absolutely. It was a case of familiarity. I suppose if Yvonne or yourself or anyone else would have gone there, who is not a familiar person in that office would not have received that salute. There would have been a bit of grilling. What do you want? Do you have an appointment?
Like if you came to my house,
this one and so
someone
forth.
Who said,
there's an element of familiarity, but there's something that I don't want us to lose.
But someone said it could be familiarity, but it could also be that he had clear instructions. Ukiona hii,
please allow them in.
But there's something that I wouldn't want us to lose sight of. The duration. How long was Echesa and team at Harambee House Annex? Is it 22 minutes, 24 minutes, 27 minutes, 1 hour, 82 minutes, 22. Or whichever amount of time they could have been there? But fundamentally, regardless of how long they were there, is one important question that I thought that Kenneth was going to answer this afternoon. And because he didn't, I hope he can answer it as soon as possible. One, who killed Kenei? Why?
That he alluded to the why.
He did.
Because you see,
he did more than allude. Actually, the why he said.
Yeah, but because you see,
he said. Remember, this guy was he was on phone. At a certain point, he was on phone. When he comes with that so-called general, he's on phone. Then he hands over the phone to this guy, who then continues speaking on the very phone somewhere. So I remember somewhere in the statement, Kenneth says, well, this source, whoever that source was, it seems that this thing was such a high-stakes thing, and Kenei was all over the place. So he seems to have known something that was going on.
Allow me to read that part of that statement from the DCI. It says, the involvement of the deceased in the complex activities of the 13th of February 2020 at Harambee House Annex clearly shows he didn't have a chance. It is evident that throughout he was receiving instructions or orders or directions from a certain source. It is manifest that the stakes must be so high and adverse that it could be dangerous to expose the source.
Reading from the statement by the Deputy President's Office, signed by Ken Osinde, being a reply, it looks like a direct reply to that line. It comes as point number 2, the entry into the office of the Deputy President was aided by some security officers was a breach of security. Who are some security officers? I think they're talking about Kenei here.
Yeah.
Being thrown under the bus, literally. But what is important, you see, Kenei will be buried this Saturday.
That breach,
and even as he's buried this Saturday, I'm sure his friends, his family, his colleagues will be asking that question that I think many Kenyans are asking themselves. Who killed him?
Kenei?
Why? Is there anything that probably he knew that wasn't supposed to be brought out? Was he murdered? Did he commit suicide? That element of suicide, I thought Kenneth tried to deal with it, and even giving the scenarios and probably why it could not, probably in his assessment and as well as that of the forensics team, could not have been a suicide. But more fundamentally, if we don't get that answer on why he was killed, and who could have been behind it, then what we saw this afternoon will end up being what we keep saying, vipindre.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the why. He says in the statement, the motive of the cold murder is very clear. It was simply to safeguard, protect, insulate, and or save the source from the adverse involvement and attendance consequences using the country's military procurement process in the most deceitful and fraudulent manner. And remember, in the statement I just read before, he talked about the source who was seemingly giving directions to the deceased being Kenei. They've solved the why. But what I found interesting in that whole elaborate footage of Rashid Echesa and then them saying there's a direct 100% link, I'm left to wonder if Rashid Echesa will not be charged with murder.
I would suspect he would, if probably that is the direction.
Assuming he was the highest ranking member of this thing that was going on.
Or because the person giving directions, as they say on the
motive.
It's interesting that there should be all these suggestions that the breach was only at the security level, because these people didn't just walk in the parking lot and then they left. I mean, there is the whole thing of how you access a VIP lounge, for instance. It's not normally just something that the security people deal with. There are also protocol people and people who are basically involved and they know what happens in which room in the building. So I think that there are many other things that perhaps will be coming out in this case, but it is a very untidy thing given the high profile of the office where all of these things were playing out.
Can I just add,
Joe,
sorry.
On the issue of the breach, I think people should not play with the intelligence of Kenyans, and CCTV footage doesn't lie. What does a breach look like? A breach doesn't look as elaborate as what we've seen today.
Or as nice and tidy.
As a nice and tidy and so repeated salute and all that. What is the Deputy President's office talking about when they talk of a breach? This is not a breach. This is a meeting that seemed to be very well organized by people inside the office of the Deputy President, including the late Kenei, who is so going to the lift and basically...
The security people appeared as mere facilitators or something.
They are mere facilitators, and I think what DCI should be trying to answer today and tell Kenyans is, what did Kenei know? Who was he on phone with? What were the conversations that were had that day? Because I think on the first case that Echesa has been charged with in court as arms procurement, I think a star witness has just been lost in Kenei, because Kenei would have known. Kenei does know. Well,
and I think now
who instructed him
to spending more time, it would appear to me now, trying to find out who and why the Kenei murder thing, as perhaps even more than the original sin, as it were, the arms steal itself.
And just to complete on that point, we look at the statement from the Deputy President's office, and it says, for the first time, by the way, it uses the words crooks and cartels. Says, we appreciate efforts made by the DCI to investigate the fraudulent access to the office of the Deputy President by crooks and cartels. These were not words that were used in the first instance when these reports of this so-called breach happened.
But I think there's also the little minor detail of 82 minutes versus 23 minutes. And I think we mentioned this at the very beginning when, Rashid Echesa was arrested. And we talked about the idea. The 23 minutes conversation was introduced by the Deputy President himself. If you remember in that tweet when he talked about, other than the 23 minutes, what else can they say, happened, in the office. And then today you hear the DCI saying, in fact, it was 82 minutes. Some of the footage we were given before was edited, and we were only allowed to, sort of take a video of it using our phones. And then we had to go and make a further request. And then you see Kevin Osinda then, responding and saying, we gave the DCI everything. But, back again to the manner in which the Deputy President handles issues, with putting out information when nobody has asked for it, and in some ways pits him against the DCI. So now it's, there's sort of a direct conflict. It's the DCI's word versus the Deputy President himself. And I think, that was not necessary.
I mean, we know 7
billion versus 21.
But I think it also exemplifies the dysfunction. I mean, we have always known that lately there is considerable dysfunction in government relative to what happens in the DP's office, what happens in the presidency, what happens in the rest of the government, and that sort of thing. Because you would expect that if this is something that happened in the office of the Deputy President, that office would be working so closely with the investigative agencies, so much so that we would hardly even know what they're discussing. But here is the DCI coming out at a press conference to say, what, when we went there first, they didn't allow us to watch the CCTV footage. They said we were going to interfere with the server. I don't know what else. And then they said, oh no, you can take from your phones or whatever device. It's only later that then now they allowed them access. Those are things that would typically be handled at the level of government that you actually don't even know what happens. But here is the DCI, who is an important part of that state machinery, coming and say, hey, you know what? We've had serious problems with the DP's office because they're not giving us information. That is actually very, very untidy. It doesn't look good when things like that come from inside government.
Was he calling somebody a liar?
Was recorded.
When you think about it. Was he, in not so many words. He would even call the
DP himself and say, hey, man, there's this thing that I'm trying to do in your office, and there are guys here who are refusing to give me access to a server.
And how far then will the investigations into the murder go? We have kept being told about Echesa and the other 4 suspects.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
General Juma.
The General Juma and the other guys, but they don't seem to be very prominent, so to say. I probably thought by now we should have had clear profiles of who they are. And then, what about these two other guys, the two Mzungus? Will that probe extend to them?
Right.
Yeah, will it extend to them in the context of, could they have also participated in one way or another,
or known something?
Or known something? Is it about Echesa and the four guys?
Foreign masters before,
does it extend to them? And if it does, have they recorded any statements? Are they witnesses or suspects? Are they around, or they went back to their country?
Yeah.
If they're not investigated for murder, will they be investigated for bribery and conniving to defraud the nation?
Yeah.
So there are quite a number of things that probably DCI will need to deal with, because questions are many in the context of, leave alone the duration, 82 minutes or 27 or 35 or whichever amount of time. What is important is a life has been lost. There was an attempt to defraud the nation. So those two things must go hand in hand, in my opinion.
I think that DCI and any good investigator would be very happy or relieved with the fact that in terms of the scope and area, that is almost defined. The scene of crime is just one. It's the office of the deputy president. I mean, I know Kenei comes from Baringo, but it's not been shot dead by cattle rustlers. This has happened within the same circles. So what we expect to see the DCI doing in the next few days is to zero in on, is it second floor? Where is the boardroom? Is it the second floor? All those people we've seen on the CCTV, because as they say themselves, there's a direct link between the activities that were taking place in that office and the death of Kenei. So why look beyond Harambee Avenue?
I would look at two scenes of crime, so to say. One, the one that you're talking about, the deputy president's office, but also his house in Imaradaima, Villafranca. Because if he shot himself, why is it that no one in the neighborhood had the gunshot?
Yeah.
I asked a security person, if you were to, shoot yourself that way, would your neighbors hear? And he was telling me it is very possible that they will hear, that no one had raises fundamental
including
questions.
The person in the main house, which is just adjacent to his house.
It's not like Kenei was living in a big mansion. It's a one-room house.
Which apparently didn't even have
an extension.
It only had a bed.
Only a bed. There are some clear signs that there is a clear cover-up or an attempt to cover up the murder. But as they say, there's no perfect crime.
Yeah.
So hopefully, some of the traces that were left will help nab those guys. But also, when we hear that some mobile phone data was deleted, then it shows you that if there is collusion, it is very high level.
Absolutely. Questions ni mingi sana, as Victoria Rubadiri would say. And hopefully
you better get a lawyer.
And hopefully they will be answered. But we still need to talk about the DPP and the DCI, because we saw them today. And, are they on again, off again, on again, off again? We will discuss that when we come back. Is the bromance on or off? When we come back, the hashtag to use is NewsGang. We'll see you in just a short while.